They don't need nerve stimulation. They're going to go on and do their business without any input. We call that being autorhythmic. Okay? Cardiac muscle and smooth muscle can both be autorhythmic. Okay? Cardiac muscle, much more so than smooth muscle. Okay? Cardiac muscle is autorhythmic, which means the tissue can create its own action potentials, which is both good and bad. Okay? In some of the more disgusting videos I've ever seen, okay, you can butcher out a heart, and you can bathe it in some lactated Ringer's solution, and you can drip some acetylcholine, or you can drip some epinephrine on there, and the heart will just keep beating. Okay? Yeah, and well, yeah. As a matter of fact, when you have a heart harvested for transport, for transplant, it continues to beat. They bathe it in some lactated Ringers, and they cool it down, but it still has a contraction cycle of a couple times a minute. You'll sit there in its little box while it's being transported, going, like that. And it has to do that. If it stops doing that, it means the tissue's dead, so you can't use it anymore. And I've done this with frogs back in physiology class, where you dissect out a frog heart, and you sit there and you drip different chemicals on it and watch it speed up and slow down. It's a little barbaric, but it's all in the name of biology, so hey, where was I going with this? I had a point. Yes, okay. So cardiac muscle tissue is autorhythmic, okay? And especially the pacemaker cells. The SA node and the AV node and the bundle are even more autorhythmic than most cardiac muscle. And we'll talk about how that works. We'll probably start talking about it right now. What else? Anything else? No, that's good. Let's go down here and talk about this. This graph, figure 18.13, this is the action potential diagram for a cardiac myocyte. Okay. And then I think the pink line here represents, this represents the development of contraction. So we know that depolarization always precedes contraction, so that really isn't anything new. Okay, right? There's the depolarization, there's the contraction. Excitation, contraction, coupling. Anything confusing about that? Okay. What's really different, and I wish I had one of skeletal muscle. What does the action potential profile look like for skeletal muscle? And I know I'm asking a lot for you to remember that. Does it look just like this, or are there some differences? Now, I'm not talking about the pink line, just the blue line. This is what we get for a skeletal muscle. Okay? Mm-hmm. This here is threshold. This is 0. Here's plus 30. Down here would be maybe minus 90 millivolts. Okay, here's our time. And this whole thing takes about 2.5 milliseconds. Okay? For right now, I want to focus on this. How different that is. Look at this is vertical. This is straight up. That is a little bit more delayed. What ion is responsible for depolarizing both nerves and skeletal muscle? What ion is responsible for the depolarization? Sodium. Right, it's sodium. Okay. What makes pacemaker cells, the highly autorhythmic cells in the heart, very different than other muscle cells is that it's the only muscle cell that calcium is primarily responsible for the depolarization. Okay. That's unique to the pacemaker cells. We're going to hit threshold, and we'll talk next time about how we do that. We're going to hit threshold, and when we do that, there's a big burst of calcium that comes into these pacemaker cells. You have sodium come in too, but you also have calcium, and that makes a nearly vertical, almost instantaneous depolarization. It's very, very, very rapid. Okay? And then we repolarize, and then just to rehash, you don't have to write anything down, just listen. I'm going to reiterate some stuff that you learned in AMP1. Once we get the cations rushing in, be it calcium or sodium, we got to slam those channels shut. Okay? And then we open potassium ion channels. And it's the efflux of potassium, the potassium going out very quickly, that repolarizes the cell. In skeletal muscle, that happens almost as rapidly as depolarization did. It's calcium leaving, or not calcium, potassium leaving, that makes us repolarize. And we get back to RMP and we reset the channels back to their resting states. You see something else very different in cardiac muscle? It starts to repolarize, but then it stops. It kind of has this like what they call a plateau period. And that's a result of slow closing calcium ion channels. Potassium is trying to flow out. And as the potassium goes out, the cell just lets calcium come in. And when calcium comes in, well, calcium's a cation, potassium's a cation. So potassium goes out and calcium comes in, you get no repolarization. Until those slow closing calcium ion channels close, you won't repolarize the cardiac myocyte. So the slow closing calcium ion channels are responsible for the plateau period. And that's really what's responsible for this very long excitation profile. And that's one of the things that prevents tetanus. Okay? Stretches it out to 250 milliseconds instead of just 2. All right, we'll stop there, and we'll pick up here next time. I'll back up. I'll probably go over a little bit more of this a second time.